because I want to try to get to as many of these questions as possible. We're going to start with a toilet training one. And these are some of my favorite questions to ask on behalf of all of you, because I'm always struck by the fact that toilet training, until you have it on board, is the most overwhelming thing. But when you talk to a qualified board-certified behavior analyst, what you discover is that for you guys, you feel like, this is one of the easier things, and it quiets my nerves when you guys say, oh yes, no, we can get that done. So this question though is about a 7-year-old who's nonverbal, and it's the individual who wrote in, it's their grandson. So will my 7-year-old nonverbal grandson ever start using the toilet on his own, and help all in capital letters?
Yes. Of course, children with disabilities will not suddenly try to use it on their own. They won't be able to pick up the procedures or how to do this on their own, kind of like our typically developing kids. Some will just look at others and figure it out. Others, even typically developing kids, need some form of training procedure. So you do need to have somebody work on a procedure with him. We generally have used the Fox and Azrin procedure with some modifications to it, but very quickly the procedure is that you have to do some preparation for this, and I wouldn't recommend you follow just what I'm trying to say here, because I'm summarizing, and it's important. The details of this procedure are very important. I would suggest that you look online for the Fox and Azrin toilet training procedure. It's in many books. We may have even outlined it on our website. So I think it's important that you get the detailed procedure. But generally speaking, the procedure is that you first kind of modify the environment in the sense that you put a bunch of really fun things you pick a toilet, a bathroom in your house, and you decorate it, and you put a TV in there, and you make it like the fun place for your grandson. That is where all of his reinforcers are located right now. So you do that, and you will start this procedure a couple of days in a row. You want to be able to really focus on it. So the longer the better, obviously. If you have 4 days, you can focus on it, then you'll be in better shape. If you have 2, that's great. Don't do it if you don't have at least 2 days. And what you'll do is that the child is generally will wear a large shirt or something with no underwear. And they will start by sitting on the toilet and drinking. That day will be drinking a lot of water or juices or other things that will instigate use of the toilet. And at the same time, if they are done with it, one way we used to give children a lot of chips and salty things, which make them actually want to drink more. So you just want to make sure the child is drinking a lot. And, you will basically have the child sitting there for a period of time until he goes. So clearly you don't want it to become aversive, so hopefully you've preloaded with liquids so that when the child sits there for, let's say, 15 minutes, he will actually void and urinate, at which point he will immediately be allowed to stand up, be reinforced heavily, whatever it might be. Take him out of the bathroom, of course, let him run around, give him massive reinforcers, food, excuse me, whatever he finds reinforcing. And then after, at this point, you're hoping that he'll be dry at least for 10 or 15 minutes, at which point you'll take him back and restart the 15-minute cycle again. So essentially, if I remember correctly, you start with 15 minutes off. A void is the beginning of the off cycle. So you're on for 15 minutes and then you're off for, let's say, 10 minutes. I wouldn't really go longer than 10 minutes because then there's risk of an accident. In fact, with some kids, you can really just stay off for maybe 5 or 4 minutes. So you want to avoid an accident. So the concept is that you have him on long enough until he voids, then off long enough so that he doesn't have an accident, and then you go back again. And now over the course of the next 2 days, you will increase the duration of time that he's off the toilet very carefully and very, very slowly. And you will decrease the period of time. So then what happens is he'll start figuring out that when I sit here, I'm supposed to void. When I void, they let me off. So he'll start figuring that out, and then you essentially, by the end of the first day, you'll end up having a schedule where For instance, he can stay off the toilet for about 30 minutes, and then when he goes back to the toilet, he will void within the first couple of minutes, and then he's free again. So once you get to that schedule, you maintain that schedule now for a little while, and then you will gradually, the next step will be to teach him to signal you. Now, the first step is just kind of conditioning his body. The second step is teaching him to signal you, and the signal will be very easy. While you're still taking him to the toilet every, let's say, 30 minutes, you will have him touch a card. He's nonverbal, right? So you'll have a picture of him sitting on the toilet, and he'll just tap that, and that should be accessible to him. So whether it's part of his, if he has a picture exchange system, that should be there, whether it's on the door of the toilet, all over the house, so that he could just touch it and you immediately take him. What you do is you have him touch it when it's time to take him, and then gradually he'll understand that he touches it when he wants to tell you to go. So it's sort of, the detail might be a little complicated. For behavior analysts, it's a pretty simple procedure. But I would really highly recommend that you read the procedure, Fox and Azrin toilet training procedure, if you want to follow that. There are many other procedures as well that are slightly different, but yeah, you can do it. They're not going to pick it up on their own, but it's very teachable.
Yeah, and I think so many times what people want to hear is that there's hope.
Oh, absolutely.
And what's striking to me is that it's very rare, extremely rare, that there's an individual on the autism spectrum, even if they have other things going on, that cannot successfully be toilet trained. Absolutely.
I have not failed at toilet training. I don't think I ever have. And it doesn't matter the age of the person, but I think most of the time, Shannon, like everything else, we think that we can teach this in the course of life, like just as everything else is happening. A lot of times when parents come to see me, which is usually initial or, a year in, and they'll say to me, we've been trying so hard for such a long time, we haven't been able to teach him. And like they'll try the typical things, like having the child watch a video or that sort of thing. And the typical things often won't work. It's, simply with our kids, we just need to catch it before they have mistakes and reinforce it whenever they actually void, and then it becomes done. Now, I do want to point out that I was talking about urination here, and bowel movements come later. They become a completely separate set of training. You cannot expect the child to learn both at the same time.
Okay.
And actually, overnight becomes the third thing. So.
Yes. So be patient with all of that, but start with the urination and get that under control.
Daytime urination, yes, absolutely.
And I want to encourage you too to get help to do that and clear the decks for, as you were saying, for several days where that's what you're going to work on. They have people who refer to it as toilet training boot camp.
Yes.
This is not the thing that you do when you're having a birthday party and having 12 guests or flying across the country.
Or even if you're just planning to go to work. I mean, you're going to have time off. And we used to do it with a number of different people because it's pretty tough on the therapists doing it as well. They have to kind of sit in the toilet with your child all day. It's kind of hard. But what I really do recommend that you also need to pile up on the reinforcers when you try to do this. Don't do it if the child is sick. That's not their normal behavior. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff like that goes around it. But don't give up.
Set yourself up for success.
Exactly. But it's a very doable situation, procedure, and don't give up hope on this. I know it's very hard, especially as the child gets older.
Okay, great, super advice. Our next question, my adult son has PDD, NOS, and anxiety. Every year, a few weeks before his birthday, he starts talking nonstop about getting older and getting gray hair, and that he doesn't want the month of May to end. He also has a few incidents of hitting, kicking, and spitting that I think are related to his anxiety about his birthday. I looked up cognitive behavior therapy, but he has moderate mental retardation, so is not aware that he is anxious. What can we do to help him?
That's so cute. First of all, I just have to say, I know it seems like overwhelming. So I have to ask where he associated getting older to something bad. Because clearly that is what is scaring him. Perhaps since he's, and I'm just completely guessing here, but since he's associating it with getting gray hair, perhaps he's seen parents or grandparents developing gray hair, and the change has frightened him. In other words, he's thinking like, if you have gray hair, is it still my parent? Or something is scaring him about getting older, and he's definitely, like, maybe he's seen getting gray hair or heard someone saying, oh, look at all the gray I have, I'm getting older, or something like that.
And it could be a movie, it could be something somebody said at school.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely. So I don't know, something about this is frightening him. On the one hand, you want to be able to teach him that things are okay, and I suggest getting him through the month of May. Obviously, you can do a countdown schedule and reinforce him every single day of May with some small item, special thing. And therefore May will become a more positive conditioned thing. But at the same time, I think you should help him. A lot of times when we have anxiety, the reason we have anxiety is because we feel we don't have control over it. So it might be fun to give him control over this. And I think the way you do that is you actually get some spray and allow him to like spray his own hair gray, maybe make yours gray. Make it so that it's nothing scary for him that you have gray hair, for instance, or get gray wigs, something where you turn it into some sort of game for him. Those are the ideas I have about it. I'm not sure if you perhaps could write back and tell us a little bit more about how he associates anything negative about getting older and getting gray hair. How did he come about that association? Maybe we can help kind of reverse that a little bit.
Absolutely. It's interesting to me because I think I was just having a conversation with an adult woman who is not on the spectrum the other day. We were having a conversation and she said, you know, this always, and it was a very specific thing. She goes, I don't know why, but that just always freaks me out. I have a problem around that. I don't know what my problem is with that. And through the course of us talking about it, she said, you know what? I just figured out why I have a problem with that. She said, do you remember that Brady Bunch episode from 1972 where they went to Hawaii and this happened? She goes, that's why. She goes, that's so funny. I never put that together before. Now, this is an adult woman who, you know, has no cognitive issues whatsoever, but her whole life has been freaked out about this one thing. And then just the other day in a conversation realized, oh, it's from a Brady Bunch episode.
You know, it's amazing, Shannon, the little things that happen in our childhood that actually have some sort of impact, and we don't even realize that they do. Because it happens as a, you know, it's a fear reaction that occurs when you're a child to something, and then that conditioning occurs without us even being aware of it.
Yeah.
That's why I was suggesting that you do something funny, because laughter and humor is the complete opposite of anxiety. Like, you cannot be laughing about something really, truly, if you're anxious about it. They conflict with each other. I remember when my son was little, he had developed a fear I might have mentioned to you. He was out on a playground in Germany with a nanny, and it started to thunder. And being that we're from California, he had never seen thunder or heard thunder before, so it sort of scared him. He must have been 2 or 3, and it scared him. And then the nanny was not really aware of what she was doing, but she picked him up and started running towards the house and saying, "We got to get in, we got to get in."
Right.
So he developed a fear, obviously, of thunder, which then kind of generalized to just the rain that was with thunder, and then of course it generalized to all kinds of bodies of water, so oceans, baths, you name it, swimming, etc. And it became a major fear. And it had gotten to the point where if I didn't deal with it, he would really become agoraphobic and wouldn't want to go out, even in California, because he was afraid there would be thunder. I had to kind of reassure him. So, you know, it took about, I don't know, maybe half a year of me reversing that conditioning. I remember we'd gone on vacation to Maui, and he wouldn't even come close. He wouldn't come down to the beach because he did not want to approach the water. And one entire week, I had to work on conditioning him to go closer and closer. And what really worked was just laughing about it and making fun of the waves and how they are. And when he started laughing, it just kind of overcame, he realized that, I don't know, maybe it made him feel more in control.
Yeah.
And so, you know, here I think that you want to give him control of the situation, maybe make humor from it.
Yeah.
And definitely give him control. Control helps a lot.
Yeah. I'm even thinking about, there's a Tony Robbins technique where if you have a memory that's unpleasant, he has you play the memory and draw funny pictures on the faces of the people in the memory to sort of rewrite it in your brain.
Awesome.
So I think what a great idea. Have some fun with this child. See if you can't rearrange what it is to get older.
That's amazing, yes.
Okay, so our next question, we had somebody, our jargon of the day about a week ago was FBA. And so we talked about that, and somebody wanted to know, what do you do if a function is automatic reinforcement? So how do we deal with things when the function is automatic reinforcement?
Right, so automatic reinforcement in sort of behavioral terminology basically says that we can't identify what the function of this thing is because it seems like it's providing automatic reinforcement. So like, for instance, if the function of a behavior is, let's say, tangible, that means that by doing this behavior, the individual gains access to a tangible object that's reinforcing. When it's automatic, it means by doing this behavior, we don't know what type of reinforcer. It's an automatic reinforcer that's occurring. Oftentimes, we refer to self-stimulatory behaviors as automatically being reinforced. So, for instance, when the behavior is this, like let's say hand flapping, the behavior in itself is reinforcing to the child and is therefore automatically maintained. The function has to do with the maintenance of it. I'm not sure that I really buy into that completely. That's sort of the behavioral explanation for it. In my opinion, there's always a function, and when you look at self-stimulatory behaviors, in my opinion, you can divide them into pain-related or sensory-related. They can, if you look a little bit further, they are somewhat attributed to some sort of a sensory dysregulation, in my opinion, and or pain. For instance, a lot of kids, you know, used to, for instance, put their abdomen against something and body rock like this, and or just put pressure on it, and that of course would alleviate pain. I sometimes used to have stomach types of issues, and I would, if you had pressed something against it, it would alleviate pain. In which cases that's a negative reinforcement cycle where you are doing something or removing something and it is causing some form of reinforcer for you, which is removal of pain.
Right. There's actually nothing random about it. It actually serves a purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, certain types of other, like I have a child who does, he spits. That's one of his behaviors, and it's been very, very difficult to get him to stop spitting. And we all kept thinking that it has to do with some sort of oral motor or GI type of problem that he's having. And we realized the function of it is that he likes, when he spits, he likes the angle that his spit takes. So it's the actual visual stimulation that he likes.
Amazing.
It's freaking unbelievable.
Yeah.
And once we were able to block the view, like not allow him to watch him doing it, then we realized it's going away. We realized this because he also produces that same thing with water, right? He does that. So now we've replaced this with appropriate opportunities for him to play with a water gun. So there's a function to most of the behaviors that we currently feel are automatic. There is a function. We need to identify the function. Otherwise, there's nothing you can do to replace it, because when you say automatic reinforcement, that means you don't know really what the function is.
Yeah. So first thing, if you're gonna try to treat it, you gotta really look at it and see what function is it serving.
A lot of times when something is automatic or classified as automatic reinforcement, if you think a little bit harder or look into it a little bit more, it has something to do with some sort of sensory stimulation that the individual is gaining.
Okay.
Whether it's visual, auditory, a lot of times it's something visual. This is a visual self-stimulatory type behavior, which a lot of times for our kids is just reinforcing. Replace it. I think they also ask, what do you do? Okay. So once you've identified, even if you don't know exactly what the child is getting through it. What you do is you replace it with something that is more appropriate but gives kind of the same type of stimulation. So if you're looking at, let's say, a child who does this, you know, a lot of kids do this with their ears, then perhaps the child would do better if they had some sort of noise canceling headphones. If you're looking at a child who plays with water or plays with sand, maybe they would stop doing that if they had the opportunity to do something sensory stimulus evoking, like something that's similar to that, but in a controlled period of time. A lot of times with even self-stimulatory behaviors, whatever they might be, we will prevent them from occurring all the time because they basically prevent the child from paying attention, but we will allow the behavior during a set period of time. So we'll say, oh, you know what, instead of like, throwing sand up and down, let me have you do this sensory activity, which is, let's say, building things with sand castles or building with clay or whatever, something that gives the same fulfillment, the same sensory fulfillment.
And I think we've wandered into an area where I can't leave it alone, because I think this is an area of great debate. Where people vastly misunderstand what quality ABA therapy is. That I see more and more articles. There was even an article this morning from a parent talking about, why is it that we're trying to take these behaviors away so that they can, quote unquote, fit in, and everybody should just get used to this behavior. And it starts with the kernel. I believe where the misconception is that they think that the ABA therapist is just trying to stop this behavior and not put a replacement behavior in. And so much of what I have seen since I have been here and watched the kids who have the most success are kids that had a behavior that they had a passion for, and that I have seen you and your team redirect it into something that is functional for that kid, and that kid flies. That behavior wasn't taken away, it was just directed into something positive.
Yes, like one of our kids who used to do this a lot, and we taught him how to drum, and now he's a spectacular drummer.
He's a world-class drummer.
Absolutely, and it all started with him doing this and holding objects and doing this, I have to, this discussion that you raised I think is a very important thing. I try very hard as a parent myself to try to understand how parents become defensive about this. And, I don't know what other people are doing, but I have to say that the goal of therapy, of any kind of therapy, or any kind of intervention actually, should only be to help the individual in some very socially significant manner. Yeah. The goal of therapy that we do with our kids is to help them access the environment and to gain reinforcement from the environment. Now, that's how typically developing individuals function. Most of what we do, well, let me put it this way. We all at some point or another figure out a way to have adequate reinforcers in our environment to keep going. That's essentially it. Some people have more reinforcers, some have less. Sometimes we have more on a given day, less on another day. But in the end, we make it so that it balances out. Sometimes we do appropriate things to gain that reinforcers. Sometimes we do inappropriate things to gain those reinforcers. But the bottom line is we tend to do the inappropriate ones more if we don't have enough of the appropriate ones, even in our lives. So people who go and become drug addicts are usually doing that because they're not accessing enough reinforcement from their day-to-day life. It's just a simple thing. With our kids, they also don't access reinforcement from their day-to-day lives. And what we're trying to do with ABA is to teach them enough ways to access reinforcement that they don't do these things that are somewhat challenging.
Yes.
It's really that simple. So if I cannot teach the child to gain reinforcement by looking at two people speaking and enjoying the content of what he or she heard, but instead the child prefers only to self-isolate and do this kind of thing, then that's what he will continue to do because that's where he's gaining his reinforcers. Yeah. And unless I stop that for a moment and show him other things that might give him access to reinforcers, then we will never know if he
Yeah.
can transition, and he will become more and more and more isolated. And the only goal of this is to integrate and have our children actually benefit from life, from their environments.
Yes, for them to be happy.
For them
and
to be happy.
find more ways for them to be happy.
Exactly.
And I feel like we prevent them from getting to that when we limit our thinking about what that might be. That the example that I always go back to is when toddlers are learning to walk. There is always a difficult portion of time when they're falling and hitting their head and not doing it well, and they get frustrated and they burst into tears, and none of us ever say, well, you know what, this is ridiculous. Why am I putting them through this?
Right.
Let's stop this immediately.
Right.
And just, get them fitted for a wheelchair, and let's not force them to walk.
That's true.
We let them
That's
go
exactly
through an
right.
awkward period so that they get to the good stuff, because we know that they will walk. And I think with more autism parents, we need to know that our kids can do more. We need to let them do more and help them to learn all the things that they can do.
Absolutely, absolutely. And ABA is it's such a huge luxury and a benefit. I mean, I wish I had people doing ABA for my kids all day long, honestly, because like I look at my youngest daughter right now, amazes me because she teaches herself so many things. Like in this year alone, in this first 6 months of this year alone, she taught herself and got on varsity lacrosse, which is great. It's a new sport for her. She has started doing a variety of different types of exercises at the gym now that she's heavily into. She taught herself guitar. She taught herself knitting. Okay,
Wow.
so all of those things, what are they really? They're just ways to gain reinforcement going forward. So in her life now, if she's bored and she wants something reinforcing, she can pick up a guitar and try playing. If she's bored and she wants something reinforcing, she can knit, right?
Yeah.
Whereas another child wouldn't necessarily have that. The exact same thing happens with our kids. If you look at it, a child who doesn't know any better than to do the behaviors that they're born with, and they haven't learned anything else, will only go back to those behaviors for reinforcement. And these could be some negative things. I mean, there are children who have feces smearing, and only because they really crave a sensory type of, tactile sensory type of simulation, which has to do with that feeling. Well, if I can direct this child now to do that, let's say with hand paint, with finger paints, well, great. That's much more functional, and it gives the child the same level of reinforcement, but it is available in all environments. The child can do it more often, can do it with other children, and so on. That's kind of the idea.
So finding that the appropriate thing to redirect that energy to, but
Very
first
important.
you have to figure out what is the need for it.
Right.
All right, I want to go on to this other question that
Sure.
I teased before. So somebody wrote in and said the CARD program, adult program, sounds amazing. Thank you, CARD and Dr. Granpeesheh. Question on certifications for potential therapists: is there a quality control component which can see if the person is patient and caring? Also, is it a demanding job? Is there supportive training and checks to see that the therapist still finds joy in the job? Through the years, have seen some wonderful special ed assistants, but also some burnt out, took the job for the money people. You all bring sunshine to the autism world, and thank you.
That's so nice.
This question, I think, it really gets to the core of it, because
Absolutely
we
does.
all
Very
want to know
important.
when we're going to have our somebody work with our child, whether it's an ABA therapist that's coming to us from an organization such as CARD, or whether we're going to school and we drop our most precious thing in the world off to individuals, and a lot of times we don't get to see what's happening. How do we know that these people are patient and caring and trained and staying up on their training?
So true. So, it's very, very hard. Obviously, you never really know someone all that well until they spend some time with you. But we do try to screen for that sort of thing at employment. There is a certain amount of that in their initial training where we're just trying to acclimate them to what is autism, what is the world of autism. Shannon is gracious and attends our therapist meetings. We have a therapist meeting once a month in each of our sites, and all the therapists attend, and they receive ongoing education. So continuing education occurs once a month with our therapists, even after they've passed their written test and their practicum test. But Shannon is one of the people who has been very kind and comes to the meeting and speaks about how it is to be a parent and what the experience of autism is more about. And so this helps our therapists gain a certain level of understanding and empathy, because I think they're all young. They have a very hard time understanding kind of how autism really affects the family. And your presentations are just one example of, it's a very powerful example actually. It's one of their favorite activities, and the liaisons this year were like, when is that going to start? So thank you for starting that up again. It's a big deal for our therapists to hear those types of things because it really changes them. Now, we also try very hard when we, as supervisors, directors, and CARD has many hundreds of supervisors, when we receive letters from our families, we always share that with the entire company. We try to put those things on the server so that everyone can read and hear those types of things. We give a lot of that sort of thing back to our therapists in terms of empathy, kindness. And I have to be honest, therapists who've been in the field with us past the first 6 months or so are hooked most of the time. I mean, the kids are delightful, even the adults are delightful. I particularly very much enjoy my teenagers. I enjoy all of my kids, but I love my teenagers a lot too, who are traditionally seen as the hardest population. To me, they're not. To me, they're the sweetest population, most frustrated, easiest to deal with, because you just have to change their frustrations. But, you know, once you're in, you're hooked. I mean, how can you not be? The kids are fantastic. The families are always so grateful. It's wonderful to help the families. And I think you have to be somewhat of an empathetic type of individual to just even approach this field. Mm-hmm. Because most of the time when people come, they're first very much afraid. They think it's a tough job. And it is a tough job, but it's such a rewarding job as well. Yeah. I wish there were other ways to check. We do want our family, we do, I think, quarterly surveys from our families. We send out a survey to the family, which is anonymous. We don't even want names, we don't care. All we want to know is the names of the therapists and who's on the case and how they're doing. We really encourage our families to be honest and tell us if there's a therapist who's not being kind, empathetic, and so forth, because unless you tell us, we may not know. And often parents are afraid to tell us because they don't want to lose hours for their child. But it is so important for you to tell us. We have almost 2,000 people out there, and it worries me all the time. I really want to know when a therapist is good or not good, or if I can help improve them. I personally, as you know, Shannon, this year my job is to oversee all the liaisons, therapist liaisons. Therapist liaisons, their job is to oversee the kind of morale and attitude of the therapists. We've initiated a thing at CARD called Carditude, which is all about gratitude and empathy and kindness and just being good people. So we're doing what we can to make sure our people are good. Yeah. And I think because the larger question here is about knowing for, you know, if you're going to a school. So hard. And there isn't really, for people who are just special ed, there isn't a definitive, like for a BCBA, there's a licensure thing, and even that doesn't say that you're necessarily good with autism. So there isn't something. Or even honest, or even decent. I mean, there's all these factors. Right. But I find as a parent that there, and when I speak at the therapist training things, they will ask me what are the things that you really love in a therapist, and I tell them that one of the things that I look for first is, does this person ask questions? Mm-hmm. If they don't ask questions about my child, then I don't think they see my child as an individual. So I look for somebody who asks questions. Very good point. I look for somebody who has a sense of humor, right? Because they have to have a sense of humor, right? And I look for them to be passionate about something, because what I have learned through this journey is that when somebody is passionate about something, that can be transferred onto other things. So true. And if somebody comes in and is passionate about music, then they will be passionate about showing a musical thing to my child, and eventually they will become passionate about my child. Right. And for other people, you know, so one of the first things I ask somebody when they're going to work with my child is I ask them,
a question and say, so what are you into, right? It also helps for when you're sending a gift so that you know what
That's
to give
so
them.
true.
But if I see them light up when they talk about something, chances are there's somebody who's gonna get excited about my kid.
That's awesome. That's actually a very good idea. It's so
People
true.
who aren't excited about anything, I don't know what to do with them.
Yeah, that's so
Do you
true.
know?
That's so true. And when my kids were young and I was always interviewing au pairs and
Yeah.
stuff, I remember thinking over the course of many years, and I have 3 children, so it was a long time of au pairs. It was a period of I was trying to figure out what is the single most important characteristic. It didn't occur to me. You're absolutely right. Like when someone is passionate about something, they really are on their journey and they are happy about it. For me, what I found was kindness, sweetness. Let me put it that way, more than kindness, just sweetness, you know? That I think was the key thing for me that allowed me to feel safe about leaving my child there.
Yeah.
It was sort of like, this is a sweet, kind person.
Yeah.
You know, they're never going to harm my child in any way. And I try very hard to find that in people that we have here at CART.
Yes.
Obviously, you have to be a little bit tougher if you're going to be a therapist and stay in the field. And this is not easy. You're driving all over the place. I mean, I'm very, very much trying. Oh, and I want to talk about this. Like, one of the things I'm trying very hard to do is to make all interventions center-based. Like, if we can, as much as possible, make these interventions center-based, just because the quality of therapy is so much better when we're center-based. We have BCBAs all over the place, running around correcting intervention procedures all the time. The quality is honestly way better.
Yeah.
And then I'm certain that everyone is doing what they're supposed to be doing, also in terms of empathy. So really, if you're looking at schools, for instance, I would also have the same conversation with the teacher, the resource people there. I mean, it's their job to make sure that the therapist with your child has empathy, is kind, is patient, is caring, and for them to watch over that person.
Yeah. And I have to say, too, we didn't get the benefit of center-based treatment, but for those of you who are thinking, oh, well, I want to do it the old school way, let me tell you, if I could go back in time and have the center-based, I would
It's
in a
much better.
heartbeat.
Yes.
The disruption on your life is so minimized by
That's
having
so
it
true.
center-based. I mean, we didn't have our house to ourselves at any given moment for
years.
a 5-year period
Yeah.
of time, and that was hard. That
It's
was
very
it was
hard.
hard on top of everything else. The one thing I will say is to the parents that are having the center base, that doesn't excuse you from being involved.
No,
Make
absolutely.
sure that you are participating in all the things that they give you, so that you are, when it's in your home, it's invasive and you have to pay attention to. Well, I think people still get out of it from time to time. We escape because we want to.
We need to.
But you need to be. I had a sign in my house that I don't know where it is anymore. I need to bring it in, but it said, I will, the team is only as good as the weakest player, and I will not be the weakest player on my son's team.
Right.
And that was my every morning get up and go, I will not be the weakest member on this team.
Well, we just actually this week, Shannon, it's funny that you say this, but this past few days, several of us here, who are sort of the executives making decisions at the company, we all kind of sat down and decided that we really need to boost our parent training efforts. We have a pretty comprehensive parent education program and also a parent initiation program, but we really want to increase the parent training here. And we found that just education is not enough, didactic education is not enough. We're working on a whole new curriculum for parents, which we're going to roll out. We are actually going to be assigning lessons to parents.
Lovely.
And requesting a certain commitment of hours, that sort of thing. And, I know it's a little bit of pressure. I understand. Honestly, I understand.
I just had a moment where I thought, oh, everybody just got a little uncomfortable. But you know what? Uncomfortable precedes growth.
Absolutely. And, we all manage somehow. I mean, I have parents who have 3 children with autism. I don't even know how they cope, but truth is our intention is never to break our parents. Obviously, we want to help as much as we can. We will apply and try to get respite care for you. We're trying to do whatever we can to help with regards to giving you, in fact, parents at CART should know that most of our locations we do like Friday nights out, where you can bring your child to the center and we do therapy and you can go out. You know, so we also do want to offer that to you once in a while, but really we want involvement for the parents, and you will enjoy it. It is hard, it's a little bit of work, but it's so
You'll enjoy
enjoyable.
the rest of your life.
So enjoyable.
I want to move on to another question that just came in. How can I help my 5-year-old overcome her fear of automatic flushing toilets and drains? And thank you very much. I'm afraid of automatic flushing toilets. They are so, you know, when you think about the sound in a bathroom and how it bounces off, and some of those toilets, they flush and it just, you know, makes you jump back. It's assaulting.
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, I could give some more thought and give you probably a better answer, but the feature of this is the unexpected. The feature of it that's scary is the unexpected, and it probably also goes hand in hand with the sound. So I think that what you want to do is acclimate the child to those two factors. One is that sound, and the second one is that sound occurring in an unexpected manner. So what you do is you start with that sound occurring in an expected manner, which means you stand with the child in the bathroom. You won't really be able to replicate the exact sound, perhaps because the toilet at home won't make that noise. Although I have an electric toilet in one of our bathrooms at the house, and it does make the same sound.
Really?
It has massive suction. But anyway, so let's assume that you will do that, and then you'll get the child acclimated to that, and then what you'll do is you will have the child not be able to see when it's happening.
Okay.
And so you'll have the child stand there, and you'll do it at different times while the child's, you know, you'll surprise them. Now, you might not be able to replicate it exactly at home. And if you are at a public bathroom where there's an automatic toilets always also have buttons that you can use manually. So I would start there, also acclimating the child to pressing the button, because I think if your child gets used to the sound first, then you can practice it where you press the button and the child doesn't look, or you can evoke the automatic feature. But I do think that you first need to get the child used to the sound while they can see it, which means it's predictable, and then used to the sound in an unpredictable situation. You know, things like Jack in the Box and those types of toys would be helpful as well, because they have an unexpected noise feature.
Absolutely. Okay, really wonderful. Another question that came in on the live feature, can you help me to teach my adult daughter how to forgive? She holds on to past hurts and pain, and it affects all her relationships. She won't let things go, and thanks. We all want to hear this.
That's such a tough one.
Yeah.
And it really has to do with I guess the child's functioning level, the adult's functioning level, because you can either, you know, it's a very hard type of thing to approach at a non-cognitive level, because it is a very cognitive type of thing. So I would assume that your child is medium to high functioning because they're holding a grudge. The children or adults who are not really at that level, either you can't tell if they're holding a grudge or they just don't hold a grudge. A grudge comes from where, let's look at this, like, why do we hold a grudge? We hold a grudge because either we've had some pain that is re-evoked every time we think of something, in which case, if that is the scenario, in which case you need to have the adult talk about it more and be able to express what it is. The more you talk about something that provokes pain, that evokes pain, the more the pain will dissipate. It's just a given. The technique that you had, for instance, was a funny, you know, the Anthony Robbins technique is kind of an interesting one. If some memory of a person or a thing or something occurred that causes pain for you, or even causes you to be angry in some way and hold a grudge, it would be interesting to draw it and make it comedy. Make it into something funny, whether you make the person look funny or the scenario, change it into something funny that will help you overcome what we might think of as a negative memory. On the other hand, depending on the level of functioning, as I said, if it's a higher level individual, then you can go into pretty significant cognitive type of dialogue with the individual about friendship, and that we all do things. And a lot of this has to do with perspective taking, theory of mind. If you're able to take other people's perspectives, it's funny. I've had an interesting couple of weeks. I've had a lot of what could be considered as like betrayals, or people where you've done something very good for someone and they come back and sort of bite you in some way, and you question it. But when they all kind of pile up back to back, you wonder, what is the universe trying to teach me? Why are these things coming back to back for me? And I just think for myself, I have to learn to better see things from other people's perspective, although I do that a lot. But
I think you're better at it than anyone I know. So
but at the point that people do something wrong, I often can't understand why they would do something wrong. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I think I have to teach myself somehow to see that people don't necessarily have that same kind of view that I have of not putting pain in the universe. I just think that holding a grudge is a very complex, very advanced type of cognitive thing. Perhaps if you can find out a little bit more, like give me, one scenario, why she's holding a grudge in that scenario, what happened, then we can also give further detailed advice to this viewer.
I think I suffer from the holding a grudge thing in my life. I do.
How does it evoked for you?
Kelby and I were having this conversation the other day that somebody can do something and I can be very reasonable and say, okay, and that's fine and I forgive you. And then it happens again. And then it's as though I did not forgive them for the thing before, because now we have two things. And now I'm as mad about the first thing, more mad, because I've let it happen again. So part of it is that I'm mad at myself.
Yes.
And then if it happens a third time, I am 3 times as mad about the first thing. It all starts stacking and piling. And people are like, I thought we moved past that. And I'm like, well, no, because you keep doing it.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And then I'm upset. And I have a child that does the exact same thing.
Right.
Only now it's turned at me. That he will say, yeah, I will make a mistake, and it's a mistake. And I will say, I am so sorry, and I made that mistake. And he'll say, Mom, it's okay. And then we get a couple of weeks later, and something of a similar ilk happens. But I had no control over it. And he's like, well,
you did it again.
He's back mad at the first thing. And I can hear my mother laughing in heaven, saying, I told you that God was going to send you a child to teach you what this is like. Yeah, and he does the exact same thing. And I say to him, what is it that I need to do to make this okay for you? Because obviously this is a mistake, but he's back mad at the first thing, and I have to go back and rework the entire thing all over again. But honestly, it's, the apple didn't fall very far from the tree. I'm the same way as a person. And it's the thing I like least about myself, because it's a lot of wasted time and energy.
But
now this has turned into a therapy session for Shannon.
I know. But it's interesting, and I'm going to give it some more thought this week, because I wonder why it evokes so much emotion about the first thing. We don't really ever forgive. Like, that's the interesting thing. It's like you may forgive someone because you really have the intention of not punishing them for something that occurred, but it's still in your memory. It's a memory trace.
Yeah.
And so when it occurs again, it's just a similar experience, and it does take on some of the properties of the first event.
It stacks. It totally stacks. And I think I get madder at myself because at the first time, whenever what happened, I was like, oh, and you really didn't mean to do it, and I accept that, and I believe that you didn't mean to do it. Let's move on.
But it's like an injury, Shannon. Like if you have a cut, right, and it heals, it still is a more sensitive region because it has been cut before. So if it's a sensitive region and you recut it, ultimately it becomes a scar. Yeah. So, if it is a sensitivity that has been evoked and is now re-evoked, it's almost like I trusted you not to evoke that sensitivity in me, and you're doing it again.
And I think what gets added to it is that I get mad at myself of, oh, I should not have trusted that was a mistake. So now I'm mad about that.
Right.
Oy. So your daughter can come live with me, and we can hold grudges together. I apologize.